You are now listening to the Vegan Stuff podcast with Caavakushi.
Hosting this podcast today are our two AI hosts, Sam and Kim. If you simply can't get enough of us, go to caavakushi.com and sign up for our vegan newsletter and get our free 7-day high-protein vegan meal plan. And we also have some good news. We will be releasing our first ever cookbook pretty soon, so stay tuned. Hey, don't forget to follow us on our socials too.
Welcome everyone to a brand new deep dive on the Vegan Stuff with Caavakushi podcast. I'm Sam, your host, and I'm so glad you're joining us today.
And I'm Kim, the resident expert today, and I am, really ready to get into this one.
Yeah, we have a really heavy but super important topic for you today, because we are diving into the global twilight of commercial greyhound racing.
Right. It's an industry that honestly is facing this massive existential crisis on multiple continents right now.
Exactly. And, as vegans, our target audience here understands that we are looking at this through the lens of animal liberation. We're looking at the exploitation, the systemic cruelty, and frankly, the massive money-making system that just does not care about the quality of these beautiful creatures' lives.
Absolutely. And to guide this deep dive, we've got a really comprehensive stack of sources. I mean, we're pulling from global news reports like the BBC, PBS, ABC News, The Guardian, plus actual parliamentary minutes from the UK and Australia.
Oh, and don't forget the campaign data from major animal rights orgs like PETA, the ASPCA, and Animal Aid.
Exactly. So we're going to synthesize all of this to show you how historical traditions are just colliding head-on with modern animal welfare standards.
So, okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand why this global ban movement is happening, we really have to look at the sheer scale of the empire that is currently, crumbling right before our eyes.
It really is an empire. It was. You look at the United States, for example. For decades, the U.S., and specifically Florida, was the absolute heavyweight champion of commercial dog racing.
Oh, Florida was huge for it. It was like woven into the fabric of their tourism.
Right. But according to the PBS reports we have, that era is basically over. Florida voted to phase it out, and the tracks are shutting their doors for good.
Which is a huge victory, but it's not just state by state, right? There's a federal push, too.
Yeah, the Greyhound Protection Act is proposed right now to officially end American dog racing across the entire country.
Wow, that would be monumental. But it's a global trend, really. Like, look at the UK. Greyhound racing has this deep, working-class, multi-generational roots there.
Oh, for sure. It used to be a massive Friday night staple. But London, a city that used to have multiple thriving stadiums, is now down to just one surviving track.
Just one. Wait, which one is that?
Romford. That is London's last holdout. And outside the capital, it's shrinking just as fast. Like, Abbey Stadium in Swindon has faced massive public reaction over stopping its races.
It's wild to think about. I always liken the collapse of these local tracks to the fall of Blockbuster Video.
Oh, that's a really good analogy.
Right. Like, it used to be this ubiquitous Friday night activity for older generations. You go place a bet, get a drink, and now it's just this rapidly vanishing relic. It's totally going to the dogs.
Literally.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating here is the economics behind why they are closing, because it isn't just about people losing interest and stopping, buying tickets.
Wait, it's not just a drop in attendance?
Well, attendance is dropping, but the real killer is the alternative land value. These tracks are sitting on a demographic time bomb.
Oh, because of open sprawl.
Exactly. When they built these tracks 50 years ago, they bought cheap land on the outskirts of town. Now, the suburbs have swallowed them up, and the land is worth an absolute fortune.
So the dirt they're running the dogs on is worth more than the gambling revenue.
Precisely. The sources give a perfect case in point from Scotland. The very last Greyhound track in Fife is reportedly holding up a massive £6 million housing land development.
£6 million.
Yeah. So when local councils run the numbers, the land is simply worth more for human infrastructure like homes people desperately need than for a dog racing oval.
That makes total sense. Why keep a declining, controversial track open when a developer is waving £6 million in your face? It's an economic eviction.
Right. But we do have to mention, it isn't dead everywhere. There are some serious holdouts.
Yeah, the sources highlight the Towcester race in the UK, which is still boasting a staggering £175,000 winning prize.
Which is just an obscene amount of money for an animal exploitation event.
It really is. And in the U.S., Churchill Downs' continued use of dog racing is still highly debated. So the big money is pooling in a few remaining strongholds.
It is. But that brings us to the core of the issue. Why are these tracks suddenly viewed as massive liabilities by the public? The shift isn't just economic.
No, it's highly moral. The moral squeeze is on. We're seeing a surge of really damning welfare allegations.
Absolutely. Animal rights organizations are really driving this. Animal Aid recently protested right outside Central Park Greyhound Stadium in Sittingbourne.
I saw that in the reports. And PETA, obviously, has been relentless, highlighting systemic abuse, doping, and track fatalities.
And these aren't just like vague claims from activists. They are backed by clinical data.
Duh.
Let's look at New South Wales and Australia.
Oh, the NSW situation is crazy.
It is. The Greyhound industry there is currently facing a formal vet's report making 5 fresh allegations of animal abuse.
And when a vet files a formal report, that shifts the whole narrative. It's not just a protest sign, it's medical documentation.
Right. And it gets darker. In Scotland, members of the Scottish Parliament, the MSPs, are raising serious concerns, specifically about doping.
Doping? I mean, I just can't wrap my head around the mechanics of doping a greyhound.
It's horrifying, honestly.
Right. Because in human sports, an athlete chooses to take a banned substance to get a big contract. A dog has zero concept of a 175,000-pound prize.
Exactly. They can't consent to it.
So trainers are just injecting or feeding these animal substances purely to augment their burst speed. It's the ultimate commodification of a sentient being.
They're treating them like racing machines, not living creatures. And the physical toll it takes on a dog's cardiovascular system is just brutal.
But I think the most shocking piece of the welfare debate in our sources comes out of Queensland.
Oh, the Q-Track. Yeah, this is a really rough reality check for the industry.
Totally. So this is a brand new track, right? Heavily funded, highly anticipated. And according to ABC News, dogs died from injuries before the track even officially opened.
Yeah, during the pre-opening trial runs.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly infuriating. The Queensland government stated they were confident the track could meet animal welfare standards after a review.
They gave it the regulatory green light.
But how can dogs die before opening day if it's safe? It's like clearing a brand new airplane for a commercial flight, but the engines literally fall off while it's taxiing on the runway.
That's a perfect analogy. You would never put passengers on that plane.
Exactly. How can regulators confidently defend a system where the testing phase itself yields lethal results?
Well, to be objective and look at what the sources say about the industry's defense, because we want to distill all the viewpoints here, regulators do defend their sport.
Right, like the Western Australia regulator.
Exactly. The WA Greyhound racing regulator publicly defended its track record during an inquiry, pointing to their strict protocols.
Protocols like what? Checking the dirt.
Basically, mandatory veterinary check-ins, track surface maintenance, injury recovery plans. Their argument is essentially that they are doing everything possible to mitigate an acceptable level of risk.
Acceptable risk when it comes to someone else's life? Typical?
Right. But this is exactly why activists argue the sport is inherently, fundamentally flawed. You can't regulate the laws of physics.
Oh, the physics of the track. Let's talk about that, because this blew my mind when I first learned about it.
Yeah, a Greyhound is running upwards of 40 miles per hour.
40 miles per hour. That's a car driving down a suburban street.
And then they have to hit a tight corner on an oval track. The sheer centrifugal force and unnatural torque on their skeletal structure, especially the right side joints, is massive.
So when you pack 6 dogs together, fighting for the inside rail at that speed, a collision isn't a freak accident. It's basically a statistical certainty built into the geometry of the oval.
Exactly. And that's not even touching on the breeding aspect of this whole money-making system.
Oh, the surplus breeding. This is such a huge vegan issue.
It really is. To find the elite percentage of dogs fast enough to win big money, the industry breeds an incredibly high volume of animals.
Which begs the question, what happens to the dogs that aren't fast enough?
Right. Or the champions who age out at just 3 or 4 years old.
They just get discarded. It creates this massive surplus that either leads to systemic culling or completely overwhelms local animal rescues.
Which is why the battleground has shifted. Activists aren't just asking for safer tracks anymore. They're moving directly into the halls of government to ban it completely.
And it is turning into a massive global legislative chess match.
It really is. Let's look at the bans that are actually taking hold. Wales is making huge moves right now.
Yeah, the Welsh Parliament approved a move to call for a ban, which led to official plans to ban greyhound racing in Wales entirely.
And literally a day later, Scottish MSPs voted on a ban as well.
Backed by some major public figures too, right? Like Chris Packham.
Yes, his support brings a ton of mainstream visibility. And the Scottish Animal Welfare Commission is also actively opposing unlicensed tracks.
Oh, the flapper tracks. We have to explain flapper tracks because that is a whole other level of shady.
Yeah, so flapper tracks are independent, unlicensed racing venues, often just set up on private farmland.
So when a regulated track closes or a trainer gets banned for doping, they just take their dogs to these underground tracks.
Exactly. There's zero veterinary oversight, no drug testing, no safety standards. It's a total cash economy.
Which is terrifying for the dog. So Scotland targeting those specifically is a really smart, comprehensive approach.
Definitely. But, not every government is on board. There are major holdouts.
Yeah, like Ireland. The minister in Ireland explicitly stated they will absolutely not follow Scotland and Wales in banning the sport.
Ireland has a deeply subsidized greyhound breeding industry. It's tied into their rural economy and exports. So politically, they are refusing to budge.
And the sources also mention efforts to stop a comeback of the sport in Vietnam, which shows how international this fight is.
It's completely global.
Yeah.
But if we want to talk about political drama, we have to talk about New South Wales.
Yes. Okay, so NSW. This is the most confusing piece of the puzzle. They famously implemented a total ban on greyhound racing. Huge victory. And then they reversed it. They unbanned it. So what does this all mean? How does a government completely flip-flop on such a highly debated ethical issue?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the NSW reversal is a masterclass in how deeply entrenched lobbying groups operate.
So it was just pure money and influence.
Pretty much. The government fundamentally underestimated the economic web of the sport. It's not just the trainers, it's breeders, transport logistics, feed suppliers.
And in rural areas, that's a lot of jobs.
Exactly. So the industry weaponized that. They threatened marginal political electorates and promoted this narrative that urban elites were destroying working-class rural livelihoods.
Wow. So they framed it as a class war instead of an animal welfare issue.
Yep. And they promised internal reforms, stricter tracking, harsher penalties to give the government political cover to back down. And the government caved.
It just shows how difficult it is to dismantle a legacy industry overnight. But even with that reversal, the fact that these bans are being debated is setting a massive cultural precedent.
Oh, absolutely. It has other sporting industries sweating right now.
Because it creates a huge ripple effect. Our sources actually pose this specific question. What does Wales' dog racing ban mean for horse racing?
This is the crux of the broader cultural shift. The debate isn't isolated to greyhounds anymore.
Right, because if you establish a legal precedent that says subjecting an animal to high-speed racing for gambling is cruel and illegal, isn't horse racing standing right next to the domino that just fell?
Exactly. The physiological risks, the gambling economy, the catastrophic track injuries, the fundamental mechanics are identical.
A horse is just a bigger dog on a bigger track. The exploitation is exactly the same.
And this raises an important question for all of us. If welfare standards continue to climb, any sport relying on animal performance is going to face an ultimatum.
They either have to radically and expensively reinvent themselves to guarantee zero injuries, which we know is impossible due to physics, or face legislative extinction.
And that's a huge victory for the shifting baseline of modern legal frameworks viewing animal cruelty versus tradition. Tradition is no longer an excuse.
Never was a good one anyway. It's just amazing to watch this all unfold. I mean, we've gone from looking at multi-million-pound land deals in Fife
to the tragic pre-opening deaths at the Q track in Queensland.
and the intense political chess matches in New South Wales and Wales. It really shows that you, listening right now, are living through the real-time twilight of a centuries-old institution.
But it does leave us with a really provocative final thought to ponder.
Oh, for sure. Because passing a law doesn't make the dogs disappear.
Right. As these bans successfully pass in places like the US, Scotland, and Wales, what happens to the thousands of racing dogs currently inside that vast infrastructure?
The rescue network is already stretched to the limit.
Exactly. And even more concerning globally, if the sport isn't eradicated completely but merely localized, does pushing it out of highly regulated countries simply drive the industry into regions with zero welfare oversight?
Like, if the capital just migrates to unregulated black markets, the suffering hasn't ended. It's just been exported to somewhere we don't have to see it.
Which means our work in advocating for these animals is far from over.
It really is. We have to keep pushing for total liberation, not just relocation.
Well, I think that gives us all a lot of pause for thought.
A pause for thought. I love that.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks for listening. We hope you liked this episode. If you did, we'd really appreciate it if you could give us 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. Also, we would be so appreciative if you could just share this episode or this podcast with all your friends and family who are vegans or vegan friendly. We're also really excited because we are going to be launching something really cool pretty soon on the site, so keep an eye out for that. And we will see you really soon with a new episode.